All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Asia Investors Landscape session. My name is Michael Quigley. I'm the VP of Investor Research at LSN.
Hi, I'm Christine Wu. I am a Senior Research Analyst at LSN.
So for those that aren't familiar with LSN, this is kind of our entire corporate structure. And really, we're a company built around facilitating and creating dialogues between early stage life science companies and investment groups and strategic partners. And we basically run everything through two proprietary data platforms. One that Christine and I work on that tracks about 5,000 investors all across the globe, where we have ongoing dialogues with, I'm sure a number of you have spoken with us about it, regarding the types of investments you're looking to make in the space, geographies, investment sizes, and so on. And we provide that information to fundraising entrepreneurs so they know who to reach out to. We also track about 40,000 emerging life science companies from all around the globe, and that's tracked in a different way through a number of different partnerships we have with conference providers and local biotech clusters kind of across the world. This enables us to offer a number of different consulting services, including branding and messaging, fundraising workshops, sourcing, and kind of doing roadshows for CEOs. So we're all at the Resi conference. We do this 5 times a year now, and it's driven really by these data and contact directories that we've established in the space to understand really who's active and what they're looking for. It's what makes Resi such a valuable event in terms of matching investors and companies. And then finally, our most recent division is Boston Innovation Capital, which is a FINRA-registered broker-dealer arm where for a select group of clients, generally those raising $10 million or more, we will generally redo the entire marketing for the company, everything from pitch deck, website, executive summary, even videos, design a global target list based on our investor network, reach out to those investors on behalf of the company, all the while kind of going back and forth between the company about our messaging and our pitch, and kind of walking their hand through the whole fundraising process and taking a success fee when a deal does close. So that's kind of just a high-level view of kind of who we are and what we do. And it is through this kind of investor platform and research that we have become to understand and become more familiar with the large influx of Asia-based investors that are now looking to North America for technologies and assets. So basically how we find investors, we go to lots of different investment conferences all around the globe. We're constantly reading financing rounds and press releases, looking at companies' websites, looking through the board of directors to try to see if they're associated with funds. Constantly scrolling through LinkedIn. We have a number of processes in place that allow us to basically have new feeds directly coming into our inbox from these sources. And this has led us to have a pretty good capture in terms of all the different investors that we track, that we've had conversations with that are allocating to the early stage life science space. Everything from VCs, which represents kind of the largest class and pool of assets, down to private equity, family offices, corporates, angels, venture philanthropy, and so on. And they're also tracked, we track these investors really all around the globe, the US obviously being the largest bar here. It's even broken just to represent kind of how it is the vast majority of capital that we track and we see. But if you look here, you see that China is actually the second largest country in terms of investor relationships that we've driven. And that's been because largely of Resi conferences like this and targeted marketing efforts by our research team to uncover these investors. As well, we track a number in Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. These are groups that are all looking externally to make investments or partnerships in early stage companies. So how we started in Asia was really an organic growth of our research network. Groups actually were coming to us.
Where does Korea stand?
I think they're
not on the map.
Below Hong Kong in terms, and this isn't representative in what we're saying of the whole ecosystem. These are groups in our network that we're aware of. We have a dialogue with. So how we started in Asia is kind of an organic growth of our research. A lot of companies had been speaking with these kind of groups and wanted to know more about them and kind of what they're looking for. Are these guys real? And so on. We go through a number of different news outlets, including Fierce Pharma Asia, China Bio, China Money Network. We attend a lot of different conferences and groups that are specific to kind of cross-border relations, including Chinese American Bio Association, China Healthcare Summit, COTRA, JETRO, CABS, and the US-China Innovation Alliance. Now, if we look at specifically Asian mandates by country, see there we have Korea was 8, so it's just a few off. But China is the largest, followed by Taiwan, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, India, and Malaysia. And this is just again, these are groups that we have a dialogue with that are using us as a source of deal flow from the U.S. and North America. And when researching these groups and kind of understanding them, we realize that there is a strong geographic diversity in terms of the types of investors that are coming out of these groups. Japan has a lot of large pharmaceutical companies. Korea has really strong public spending on R&D. Singapore and a lot of the investors there are focused in digital health, and they have a lot of initiatives going there. Taiwan has a pretty unique access to their public market, which has had some ups and downs recently. And China, even regionally within China, there's a lot of different kind of landscapes, with Beijing having top universities, grade A hospitals in digital health. Shanghai, a lot of top investors, enterprises, also known as the Chinese biotech Silicon Valley. And Shenzhen has a really robust VC community. And if you look at the mandates by investor type coming from Asia, you see it follows a pretty similar track of the rest of the world, with VCs kind of being the largest pool, followed by PE, and then actually the large pharma and strategics are a bigger portion here than what we have in kind of the rest of the world. And we see that with not just large pharma and biotech companies, but a lot of large conglomerates and companies in everything from textiles to traditional technologies, groups like Tencent that are now looking into healthcare, similar to how a lot of the US kind of tech giants are doing that as well. Looking back on the mandates, and again, with mandates, what we mean is these are conversations that we have with these groups. The Chinese and the Asian investors that we speak with tend to be a little bit more opportunistic in terms of what they're looking for, whereas a lot of the US investors are a little bit more specialized in terms of sectors across groups looking just in medtech and healthcare IT, biotech services, biotherapeutics, medtech. And we think this is in part due to the fact that for a lot of these investors that are looking cross borders, this is some of the first time they're making a lot of these investments. So they kind of just want to be open to anything that they can see. In terms of the stage of investments that we see a lot of these groups are looking for, we can see that in the US, preclinical to phase 1 represents a little bit larger portion of the investor interest, whereas groups coming out of Asia, preclinical and phase 1 represents a little bit less, and a similar pattern in devices. And basically what this means is that the investors that we're speaking to coming out of Asia are looking a little bit later stage than some of the investors we're seeing here in the US. And again, I think that's a function of their risk tolerance given the risks inherent in doing cross-border investments. They want to see a little bit more proven technologies prior to making an allocation. And finally, one of the most interesting charts is that of the investors that we've spoke with coming out of Asia, just about 80% of them are looking internationally for investments, as opposed to just 20% are only looking to invest in kind of their local geography. So again, that's kind of a high-level summary, really, of the conversations that we've had and the data we've collected. And now Christine's going to dive into a little bit about what we're actually seeing in this space in terms of kind of allocations and investments being made.
Thank you, Michael. So let's look more at the emerging trends that we see in cross-border investments for Asia-based investors. So this is just looking first at a high-level overview. We're seeing a lot more money coming out of Asia into foreign countries in all industries. And so you can see in this chart that there's a lot of growth happening, and we project to see that as well as in the years to come. So since we are focusing on healthcare as a healthcare conference, we actually ended up using our LSM database that Michael described earlier. And it was the company database that tracks the over 40,000 healthcare companies globally. And we were able to look at the Series A deals that happened and closed between 2015 and 2017. And specifically, we were able to look at which of those deals were backed by Asia-based investors. And we saw for each year, 2015, 2016, 2017 has progressively grown in the activity from Asia-based investors. And of course, 2017 is still happening right now, so that 20% might actually grow in the next 3 months.
Yeah, and also note that this is both lead investing and co-investing. So really, any level of participation from an Asia-based investor, we've been seeing a pretty steady increase.
So to break it down even further, of those that were funded by Asia-based investors, most of them were therapeutics, followed by diagnostics, and then medical device and digital healthcare IT were more on the lower end. But this overall distribution is actually very similar to what we see in the US, with the exception of digital health being a little bit more predominant in the healthcare industry here. So now looking more specifically at disease areas or indication areas of interest for Asia-based investors. First to point out, in the US and European funds, we actually see more funds focusing directly on specific types of technology. So we speak with US-based funds that invest solely on cardiovascular disease, or European funds that focus on oncology. But in general, Asia-based investors tend to be a little bit more opportunistic, not having a mandate very specific to a specific disease or a specific type of technology. Though that being said, there are buzzwords that really ignite interest in Asia-based investors, like oncology. And immuno-oncology especially is huge, especially on oncology and cancer types that are very prevalent in Asia, like liver cancer. Also, AI is a huge interest now. Of the Series A deals that we looked at, a number of them were big data AI type of drug discovery platforms. Precision medicine is another example. Technology that is very personalized for the patient is huge as well.
Yeah, and I'd say that holds true also in the interest of US-based investors. There are a lot of these kind of main three areas between immunotherapies, precision medicine, and artificial intelligence that's really driving a lot of the big high-profile Series A's that you're seeing.
And also, the geriatric population is actually an interesting point here. China specifically is seeing a growth in the geriatric population, specifically in those 65 years and older. And China has started to really recognize that and seeing that and trying to use the healthcare industry to help these older patients. So any technology that really addresses age-related disease like neurodegenerative disease, or Michael talked a little bit about medical devices, which we'll also talk about later, medical devices that can really support these older patients with their quality of life. So there are many opportunities, as you can probably tell so far, in Asia for healthcare. There's a growing interest in large conglomerates, such as Tencent. You see in this press release that Tencent is pouring millions into American-based digital health startups. And just similar to how Google here is really interested in healthcare IT, that's kind of analogous to Tencent going into digital health. Also, healthcare is starting to be regarded more as a national priority in China. Especially the CFDA actually did implement more regulations to help with the acceleration of approval. For example, if a product has been approved in the FDA here, there is an accelerated process for having to be approved in the CFDA. And that's because they are now starting to really value data that has been found in the US or foreign countries and being able to add that into their investigation.
And that was as recent as this year, right? That those regulations changed, that the CFDA was going to be accepting FDA data.
Yep.
So that's a big boon potential for any companies that are doing trials here.
Very recent, for sure. And then also, there's a reform for clinical trial management. China has also been trying to set up some more clinical trial sites, and also just a lot of trying to help prioritize and accelerate the healthcare there. So the medical device industry in China specifically is actually a huge growth potential for medical device companies. So we actually have been hearing this a lot recently with the China-based investors that we're speaking with in our network. And we actually,
even just at the beginning of this presentation?
Yes, even just at the beginning of the presentation. Actually, I was meeting with someone for lunch too, and he was telling me this. So what we ended up doing was looking at statistics and research to help back up why medical device is starting to be pretty hot in China. And it's because in 2015 and 2016, China has seen an increase in market growth in medical devices, and it's been estimated to continue to increase this year and the years to come. So that, coupled with how China's medical device market is only 14% of China's total healthcare industry, whereas comparing that to a global average percentage of 42% from the healthcare industry. So China has a lot of catching up to do for medical devices, and investors there are starting to really realize that. So it'll be interesting to see in the next years what happens there. So there are challenges in entering the Asian market. After all that being said, the Chinese currency exchange control still remains pretty tight. Actually, very recently in July of this year, the State Administration of Foreign Exchange of China implemented a policy that really is strict for any company that wants to bring out anything over $10,000 USD to foreign countries. These companies would have to report to the administration, and then the administration will have a very strict evaluation for these companies of where the money is going to, for what purpose, and when it will be spent. So this has been a really tough hindrance that a lot of Chinese-based investors have been really battling to just get money out of the country. So as an entrepreneur, one of the hugest questions to ask is whether or not this China-based investor has offshore money. So a fund based outside of China is a really important value for wanting to get an investment from this Chinese-based investor.
Particularly in understanding what the investment timeline might look like. Because even if they do decide to invest in you and their fund is based locally in China, they have to wait through government approval to kind of be able to get that money out, so it can elongate things.
Yep. And also, one of the consequences of this policy is that because Chinese-based investors are having more difficulty bringing money outside of the country, they are forced to look more internally within the country, within China, of their technology. So then the technology in China, certain areas are starting to become very overcrowded, overheated, and overvalued. So we also wanted to highlight some of the deals that we saw that closed in 2017. This first one, Platelet Biogenesis, is actually really interesting to us because they actually met their lead investor here at Resi, or not this Resi, but past Resis. And so we made that introduction, and we're actually very excited to hear about it. The contact at Qiming actually told us about the press release when it came out. So it was very exciting to hear from them directly. AD Bioscience, they have a cancer and pulmonary hypertension mTOR inhibitor, so a therapeutic that addresses the oncology market, which we talked about is very important in China and Asia, and also pulmonary hypertension, so addressing the geriatric population. The next one, LifeMine Therapeutics, is an example of an AI drug discovery platform. Virogen Biotech, another immunotherapy for cancer. And Carius is just an example of Tencent, a large conglomerate investing into healthcare technology. And Escape Bio, this last one, is a neurodegenerative disease therapeutic. I will hand it back to Michael, who will discuss advice to get to these investors.
Yeah, so when you're starting, obviously, just like with any investor, no matter where they're based or what class they are, it's really important to understand them, kind of where they're coming from. First thing you want to understand is their geographical exposure. Are they specifically looking in Asia, or are they looking globally? Once you've kind of answered that question, or think you have a good feel, understand if they have a preference for leading rounds or co-investing. Generally, in our experience, investors might be open to investing overseas, but if they haven't yet invested in a company in the United States, they're probably not going to be willing to lead a round. They're going to want to co-invest first to kind of get experience working cross-border, and then maybe later on they'll be leading. So if you're looking for a lead investor, you're going to want to find, and it's coming out of China or Asia, you're going to want to find an investor who has a history of investing in the US, most likely. Understanding their motivations, just like with any group, are they purely financial, looking to make a return, or are they a strategic investor that's maybe the VC arm of a Chinese corporation that has strategic ties to the country? In our experience, most of the groups that are looking to invest cross-border are looking to leverage their relationships with manufacturing, research, distribution centers in China. So there is generally some kind of angle that they're looking for. And that's something that's really important to understand too, is really trying to understand your market in the Asian or local economy for that investor. And that can be done by speaking with consultants, other investors, and just kind of having an open mind, because a lot of the times the economics and drivers are different because of how the regulatory and reimbursement environment is set up. So a great market in the US might not be perfect for in a Chinese or Asian economy, and vice versa. And looking through if it's complementary to their portfolio or pipeline, their distribution channels they have, and any personal ties to the country are also kind of important to try to research prior to a meeting. This, again, also very true with investors in the US, but particularly based on our work with investors coming out of Asia, is understanding who is an actual capital provider versus what we call like a connector or a consultant or an investment banking group. Many entities and individuals promise to connect startups with investors from their home country, but they're not the actual decision makers on the investment themselves. So understanding if they have a dedicated fund, what their investment process is like, and kind of asking these questions up front can really help you better understand the level of interest and the chance of them closing it in the near term on a deal with you. Be cautious about potential downsides. Groups that are misrepresented by non-experts, so making sure that the people you're speaking with really are able to understand your technology and understanding their level of comfort with your problem and your technological solution. And these are just some of the questions you can ask to identify capital providers as opposed to connectors. What's the background? What's your track record? What is your actual mandate? What are you looking for? And ultimately, do you invest your own money? Do you have a dedicated fund? These things can kind of flesh out pretty quickly the type of person that you're communicating with. And these are just some common myths that we see a lot. The first one is my ideas will be stolen. First of all, I mean, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan all have strong IP protection rules, and IP protection in China has improved significantly. This is just a case of something where I feel people talk about it, but in my experience, albeit it is pretty limited, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, I really just haven't seen a lot of cases of stolen IP happening. So I mean, it's something you always want to be cognizant of, but I wouldn't not reach out to investors because you're afraid they're going to run away and steal your idea. Also, large population doesn't always equal large market. Again, need to consider regulatory risks, reimbursement risks, and the differences between your geography, whether that's North America, Europe, Canada, and the Asian country you're looking at. Also, introduction is a must. It's not entirely true. Obviously, a referral or an intro is the best way to go about raising capital. But if you have a great technology and you have a strong team behind it, and you reach out professionally, that can still get you through, get your foot in the door, and get you into the room. And finally, I mean, it's a little bit less common myth, but capital from Asia is dumb money, and they're just trying to offload into US technologies, not really caring what it is. It's not true. The groups we deal with are very sophisticated in their diligence process, just as any US-based investor would be. They set up meetings with KOLs, they look for demos of medical device products in the OR. they're just as sophisticated as any of the investors we deal with here. Some final tips: identify your product's Asia angle and stakeholders, and really understand how your product would fit into the Asian market from a regulatory and reimbursement standpoint. Do your homework and make sure you understand the investors prior to a meeting or reaching out. Start the dialogue early, understand their decision process and timeline, and ultimately create face time and build trust. If you are going to be serious about raising capital from an Asia-based investor, particularly if they don't have offices here in the US set up for sourcing, you're probably going to have to take a trip over there, because FaceTime is really the best way to build trust. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you work with Chinese investors?
We basically go through a 21-point kind of interview to understand the areas that they're looking to invest in, and then we have that all aggregated into our investor database, and we provide that on a yearly subscription to companies who are fundraising. So if you're looking for early stage 510K medical devices, and you're looking to allocate, like you said, $500,000 to $2.5 million, any of our clients that are in that space will see that and they'll reach out to you. And it's very similar to how the partnering system works here at Resi, but it's kind of done year round. So it's not just conference focused.
So the companies pay the annual subscription fee to
Yeah.
you, right?
We also provide introductions and try to bring together, like the example of platelet earlier. That was an introduction made by us. So
Yeah.
we try
And
to keep
we are currently exploring with a couple groups the idea of working on more of a buy-side engagement, where a Chinese or Asia-based investor or strategic would hire us on like a retainer basis to scout for them and identify leads and assets.
I think.
Yeah. But we haven't signed any of those deals yet.
Any other questions?
Only focus on the China investors, equity investor or any other like stock market? Do you have any?
We're pretty exclusively private companies. Yeah.
Since we focus on early stage companies, most of them are private.
Okay.
So other than the traditional direct investment for equity, have you experienced a Chinese investor want to do licensing for licensing products for their domestic China markets in return for the because licensing actually the investment has much less restrictions in terms of foreign investment from the Chinese government.
Yeah. So we've seen in a lot of cases, even oftentimes with the equity investment, they'll include as a kicker they want rights to the Chinese market. And also, yes, we have seen, particularly with the pharmaceutical companies, they're looking for licensing opportunities as well.
Still mainly in the therapeutics pharma.
Yes, mainly in the therapeutics.
Yes, Zella just went public about a week ago. And at the first day trading, I think the share price went up by 55%. So basically, they license the technology from US for China rights.
Yeah.
And they do clinical trial and they try to get the CFD approval, or they work with Chinese pharmaceutical company to try to get the product to be approved by FDA.
Yeah.
And they are very successful. The company is only 3 years old.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah, roughly about 3 years old.
Yeah.
And they raised, I think that they raised 100 million. I think just year one, and then I think it just very
Just with the
quickly,
business model that you just described of in-licensing U.S. assets developing.
Yes, yeah. They don't really do the research on the new drug, so they just only license the potential best technologies
Yeah.
for China. So it works very well. So the market cap, I think I looked yesterday, it's already $1.3 billion. It's 3 years old, company. So
Wow. How far is their lead asset?
I think that they work with multiple leading pharmaceutical, companies. Pipelines. So they are doing pretty well.
That's a significant market cap.
Yes,
Yeah.
1.3 billion. So within 3 years. So
Nice.
So lots of potential.
lots of potential. Yeah.
You mentioned the new FDA, the new Chinese FDA rules on use of American data. Do you tell us more detail about that? Specific seeds?
It's not my specialty,
Okay.
to be completely honest. I'm just aware that they have a process now for accepting data from U.S. trials. I'm not sure what weight that gets you.
May I
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit?
Yes.
Sure.
Actually, one of his family member is a clinical CRO in China. She runs the CRO. So basically, in the past, you have to enter at least phase 2, phase 3, or even FDA approval for a drug to enter into Chinese IND, and IND needs approval. It's not like US, you can just file IND and wait for 30 days. You need to get approval from China CFDA, China FDA to approve for the IND. Then you start the whole clinical trial. So this whole process makes Chinese U.S. new drug enter the Chinese market. There's about 5 to 8 years of delay. On average, that will be 5 years delay. So by that time, you can a Chinese equivalent farmer can build a biosimilar or bio-better drug, me better or me too drug, and launch the drug even before the truly innovative drug enter the Chinese market. They can already do clinical trials completely domestically and enter the market earlier than actually the first drug in China market. So right now the Chinese CFDA has completely eliminated all these barriers. So now they are basically accepting multinational clinical trials and MRCP, and they are setting up all these. They just joined ICH as well, so they are setting up all these kind of rules, just like FDA or European EU's, to basically allow all the new drugs, truly innovative drugs, to enter the China market. And they eliminate a lot of rules that in the past has made a lot of not so new drugs, has characterized as new drugs. They have eliminated all those rules as well. So now it's basically, it hasn't, the whole rule has not been set into the laws at this moment. They are just drafts. But we expect within like a few years, the playground will be completely leveled for foreign or domestic players.
Oh wait, so you still need to do in the phase 2, phase 3 in China now?
You still, so yes, it's actually, it's very, I would say nobody can give you a definitive answer at this point because the rules are, it's just draft. But the draft will be written into laws and rules, but it's just whether they will be modified or what's the final rule is going to look like, nobody knows. Probably in a year or so, everybody will have a much clearer. But the trend is within 5 years, it's gonna, the playground will be level. Entering China is like entering Japan.
Okay. And in Japan, you do not need, you still need I think you only need bridging studies.
Yeah, exactly.
Pharmacokinetic studies.
Exactly. So China is accepting the clinical trial data from international clinical sites. In principle, from now on, but in reality, the CFDA reviewers, they are not trained to be prepared for this yet. But that's the trend that's going to be put into practice in a few years' time.
Okay.
Nobody knows exactly how.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. I think next is, next you get to hear a panel of actual investors coming out of Asia looking for U.S. investments. So you hear straight from them.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone.